Okay. So, yeah, lots of dhammas were engaged in. Um, I think there was quite a fine balancing between too much effort and too little effort until it sort of became effortless or right effort. And it was because of the observance day um, on Monday. I put in lots and lots of effort uh, just to practice, but it had undesirable consequences as a result of that too much effort. I actually hurt one of my ribs from breathing. Yeah. So yesterday I thought, okay, I've put in so much effort, wrong effort. I'm I'm just going to enjoy the day and be happy, uh, regardless of conditions. And it was a great day. Yeah, uh, I could. I didn't have to believe in uh, what was what the mind was telling. Well, I mean, I pay attention to the mind and telling me that things are pleasant, things are unpleasant, things are good, things are bad. But you can just kind of uh, brush that off and see into the emptiness and think, why am I believing that? Why am I why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? Why am I engaging in this in such a way? And just looking into dependent origination and seeing uh, the emptiness of all things, and then being able to just let go of a great burden.
Okay. In a way, you're kind of a step ahead of me.
I'm not sure about that, Dhammarato.
And, well, when I say a step ahead of me, what I meant by that was uh, uh, that you're beginning to talk about what the normal sequence would be. Uh, Very shortly, that would be we have spent quite a lot of time talking about the kind of thoughts that are referred to as hindrances or unworthy of being thought about. And that then the next point would be, well, what is worthy of being thought about? And that's what you're beginning to already do is to start looking at that which is worthwhile looking at.
Yeah,
Now, um, in the Anapanasati Sutta, it treats the Dhammanupassana in a completely different context than the Satipatthana Sutta does. It's actually quite startling, the distinction, until one begins to understand that no, we're talking about the same thing, but one is looking at it laterally through time, and the other one is thinking of it as in this moment.
yeah,
And Satipatthana is talking about it in this moment. What right now is worthy of being seen? And that um, in that regard, in the Dhammanupassana part of the Satipatthana Sutta, it first lists the hindrances. As this is Dhammanupassana, these are the contents of the mind that need to be investigated.
mm,
The next thing that's on the list then is the five aggregates. Now, in the Satipatthana Sutta, it just kind of mentions in passing, like in a paragraph or so. But in other really important suttas, possibly one of the most important sutras, number 22, which is the simile of the snake. The last half of that whole sutta is about these 5 aggregates.
That's about grasping the snake as the Dhamma, right? This is
Yes, the
yeah.
grasping of the snake. If we'll spend a moment on that and go back to it at a later time because of its profoundness, and that is that if one grabs a snake, a poisonous snake especially, one does, as far as non-poisonous snakes, one does not grab an anaconda. But especially some of them that have been in the neighborhood of South Thailand that I've seen. So
Mm.
the poisonous snake, though, can be grabbed if you grab it correctly. Now, having been in Oklahoma and having as a child seen this kind of stuff, in India, or the way that the Buddha was talking about it, is that the first thing they will do is get a forked stick, which you look on trees well enough, you can find a place where you can find kind of a fork. You whittle it down to where it's kind of like a Y, with depending upon the size of the snake, how long this part of it is going back, so that you can get that snake and pound that thing on it. But where you put it is right at the back of the throat. Okay, not down on the neck. In fact, the snakes are probably pretty squeezy around that kind of stuff. And so if you grabbed him by the neck, he would turn right around and bite you right on your hand. All right, so you got to grab them high up. And that this is the simile also of the Buddha, is that you've got to grab the Dhamma correctly, or it will turn right around and bite you. And that there's many different ways that a student can get bitten. One of them is by putting in too much effort. Okay, and that's dukkha right there. Another one would be not putting in enough effort. Another one would be wanting something that we don't have. So there's all these little kinds of things, but then you can get into the really, really big stuff, like let us call it just magical thinking. Because magical thinking prevents people. In fact, you could go so far as to say it is magical thinking that keeps the entire population of 70 to 74 million people here in Thailand from being just hung out all the time. I mean, where is their practice? And the answer to that, by and large, is within the population in general. The magical belief is that samadhi is too difficult. It's too hard to do. All right. Well, if one is working too hard and no success, then the later solution would be then that that the overall population gets that and turns it in, because everybody believes that samadhi is very, very difficult.
Yeah, even working at a job, and feeling as though, oh, I don't have the time for myself to abide in pleasant states, because they're still living in the past. They're still absorbed in that hindrance of worry and doubt. But even that's an object of concentration. In a sense, it's just the unwholesome, as opposed to the wholesome. But they are teachings regardless.
Okay. Yes. Exactly so. In that regard, then, one of the ways that snake can bite is by confusing the Dhamma with the world. And so that logical extension that you made there, that's a very worldly belief that
Mm.
some things are just too hard to do, and so they're not worth doing, or that the value is beyond me. It's in fact the Aesop fable is a fable of the fox
And the
who gets
grapes.
away with the sour
Yeah.
grapes. Okay, they were too hard to get, therefore there must be, what's the point of, they must be sour or
That
something.
was a big plot point in James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. He made a big point of the fox and the grapes. It's also interesting that James Joyce wanted, he had this turning point in his life. Do I become a part of the clergy, or do I become an artist? And he threw his religion away because he thought that he had another way to express what the religion was trying to teach. Yeah,
Right.
very interesting.
Exactly. All right.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's then possibly the foundation of all of man's problems. Is you see that if we there's how to say I'm there's a problem with language, and so
Definitely. Yeah.
when we use the word religion, naturally it's got multiple definitions. When we use spiritual, it's got multiple definitions. In fact, everybody's got their own ideas of it. But having no other words to use, we could go so far as to say, and maybe even from the teachings of the Buddha, it would look like then that if there is um, some well habituated suffering that poses itself as longing, then this will give rise to the spiritual needs of man or our inflection to be religious, because it does have an ounce of reality to it. And then, because every time man has in fact done this, we have proved it to be true hundreds of billions of times. And that is that if we put in the right effort, we will get that what we want. But it's also been proved hundreds of billions of times we don't always get what we want. And so this is what religion has wound up being, is a grand experiment. But that when it catches the flu or the catches the snake bite is when magic is added to it, rather than insisting on no, only the facts. The facts are either self-evident or provable in court. And if we can't go along with that enough information, then we have to add magic, and be careful, because magic is poison. That there is a line that you can come up to, and generally we do that with great humor. One of the lines that I will come up to right now, in fact, just as a side point, is that isn't it marvelous that the poetic justice department of the great common machine in the sky sent the coronavirus to help Mother Earth breathe by making humanity stop doing it for a little while.
Yeah, it's quite wonderful. And each I don't know, each oh how to it, it's different for each. I'm just going to use the word individual for now. It's hard for each individual to, oh, sorry, it's easy to see that each individual completely, uh, has originated from a very unique set of circumstances, and that they react differently to this situation, so that it might give rise to more worry or to less worry.
Mm-hmm. But very few people will take the opportunity. Let us say that few people will tend towards in their overall thought system. Few of the people will tend towards yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay. I got 3 weeks off with nothing to do and no place to go. Everybody will have that thought once in a while, but most of it will be then replaced by worry, frustration, money worries. In fact, everybody. That's the difference in the cultures. Also, the Thai people have family always to back up to. So they're not so much worried about money. That's part of the reason why this remains a third world country. Isn't that marvelous also? To where the ones who are worried the most about money become the first world countries, but then that's all they've got. But Thai people still have their families. And that was a long, slow lesson for me to learn. But a part of that lesson is that I wound up saying, in that regard, okay, I've got choices here, and if I've got a choice of having a Thai family versus a Western family, I'm going to choose that Thai family, especially when they are North Carolina folks that vote for Trump and go to church and look really weird, and the Scots at me every time they see me. The only one in my family ever accepted me as a Buddhist monk. But my Thai family hold great respect for me that I had been a monk and was a student of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, along with 10,000 other things. So the point then at this level is getting back to that snake. The Thai people have been bitten by some kinds of snakes, but not by as many as in the West. But there's still quite a lot of magical thinking in Thailand, but it hasn't destroyed the society because the good part of Buddhism, or the wise part, has also had a number of quite marvelous influences. And so it's very interesting to see the various ways of the press doing some Google searches. I was beginning to see what had been going on in Thailand and who was doing what and who was saying what about it. And it appears that within Thailand, they're doing a much, much better job because they're following kind of along with the mentality of China, only kind of early. They were about to finish a geriatrics hospital, but it didn't get open for that. It got open for the coronavirus and a whole lot of other stuff like that. Now they're tending to wear motorcycle helmets around as well as the face mask, since they've got so many motorbikes anyway. We've had 3 cases here in Surat Thani, all 3 Italians and isolated. But let's get back to the Dhamma. The Dhamma part is that there is a lot of magical thinking, and that the more magical thinking it is, then the more damage it can do. So that we've looked at it in one regard is that if the student thinks that samadhi is too difficult, then he's not going to do it at all. If he says, okay, it is the thing to do, but now he's working too hard at it, then he more than likely will quit. This happens with the Goenka retreats, to where it's years between the time that a guy will do a retreat or a woman and then do another retreat because it's so difficult.
I wanted to leave during the Mahasi retreat. I came to my teachers and said, "I've got to leave. I've got to do this. I've got to do that." And they're very calm and reassuring that no, you're right where you need to be.
Everybody wants to leave.
Yeah.
Okay, so That's part of learning how to do the practice correctly. In fact, um, dogs do it because if they have the stereo effect of sniff. In other words, how does the dog follow a trail? He goes back and forth. All right. Also, when I was in high school, I did a little robot system that it followed a piece of masking tape with just one photo cell, because it would go off and on and off and on. And if it got lost, it would turn around in a circle, come back where it was, and go along that path. Okay, so it only had one photo cell: white, black, white, black, white, black, and that's what turned the two motors on in the back, like a tank, so that it would maneuver itself along the way. This is exactly what we have to do with uh, right effort. And also, this is the same thing in computers as a binary search. You know what I mean?
I I took an introductory course to computer science, but I'm not entirely I can't remember what binary search means. I
Okay,
looked at search
you've
algorithms.
got everything in alphabetical order, and you're looking for Jones. And so what you say is, okay, the list is this long. I'm going to go halfway in. Okay, and what do I have here? I have Sam.
Yeah.
I say, okay, it's got to be less than that. So I take this half of the list
Get
up
that.
here and
Yeah.
go halfway into that. Okay, until I find it. All right. That's another way of looking at this one's right effort,
Hmm.
is you have to kind of circle down and hone in on it, because from time to time you'll see yourself drifting into not having enough, or having too much effort. And so it's really a learning to balance. It's a skill to be developed. And this is exactly how you do the skill, is by making a whole lot of mistakes without ever having the magical belief that this is too hard. Or let us say that that doesn't overwhelm you.
Hmm.
So you can see how, in fact, the simile of the snake really has mass qualities right through the whole system, that we have to at every time keep grabbing the Dhamma by literally by the throat. Because otherwise, if we grab it anywhere else, we'll wind up with some sort of magical thinking, which means we've gotten bitten by something. We're not practicing right. And normally what that means is that we will absent-mindedly allow a hindrance to just take over. Which happened one time with me on a retreat. I was on a long retreat and got really, really bored. And it took me days to figure out the reason I'm bored is because I'm not practicing correctly. If I start practicing correctly, whippee-ki-yo, I'm back in the woods doing a place
Yeah.
to go. So this is the way of the practice. And that it's good that we're talking about this, partly because it's a natural tendency of a teacher, even in algebra, is to teach this, which in the book then is led by that. Then we teach the next thing, and then we teach the next things, and the kids are back there saying, wait a minute, I didn't get
Yeah.
that one. We need to go back over that over and over and over again until the kids get it. And then we can move to the next lesson. There's no reason to go through it all. And that so that's why it's good to slow down, and at least make then this demarker between um, getting bit by the snake, or now what are we going to do now that we've got it by the throat, which is where that section in the Satipatthana Sutta comes in, with now that we've dealt with the hindrances of all things, we now are going to say, okay, now that we've got the mind free for work, what are we going to look at? And you'd also started talking about that too, okay? Especially in the regard of there's a major, major connection between anatta and sunyata.
Yeah, I noticed that.
If there is, if it is empty of self, then it is in fact empty because the only thing that's ever put in there is a magical self.
Hmm.
Gives it a quality. An example of that is gold. Gold has some inherent quality. It's soft, it's heavy, it doesn't rust, it's very malleable. I won't go into all of the descriptions of that. But that gives gold, and also is a very good conductor of electricity. But that's been most recent. Um, but why does it then have such value? All of the value of gold is magical thinking on the part of humans because we like it,
Pleasant, yeah.
because it has these qualities to it, and we like those qualities. But we don't want to make arrowheads out of it because we don't want to lose it. We want to keep it. And not only that, but gold arrowheads just are not even effective, even against heavy cloth. So, uh, if we need to actually get some work done, then the stronger it is, then the better. And you know that in fact that's been a major aspect of mechanical engineering. And in fact, that is the definition of mechanical engineering is what can we get that's really hard so that we can beat the hell out of this thing that's really hard.
How to learn with how basically how to tinker with things. Yeah, yeah. I can see the value in being in wanting to become an engineer. Yeah.
Yes, it's a nice moniker to wear.
Yeah.
Got me plenty of job opportunities anytime I wanted it. So, uh,
That's an
yeah,
interesting thing as well about availability of requisites in our lives and what enables us to so easily get food, water, medicine, clothing, as easily as possible. Hmm.
well, it it kind of looks like it to the archaeologists that way back in the hunter-gatherer days, before we settled down in subsistence farming, that humans worked about 3, 4 hours a day at most. And then they had nothing to do with the rest of the day but sit around at the party with no boom boxes until somebody finds a hollow log.
Yeah, mostly storytelling.
Yes, that's exactly how story. In fact, I think that that's how language got started was
Yeah.
through the concepts of storytelling.
The
And
sorry, the goddesses of speech, the muses, are so interconnected with singing and storytelling and culture, um, and their just their qualities are very interesting. That's all.
mhm. So while uh, that 3 or 4 hours of work sometimes was strenuous, sometimes it was deadly, and sometimes it required them to be nomadic. Um, Still, they were looking for something, a longing in the heart. That religion, in fact, goes all the way back. That there has been a certain amount of suffering that they said, oh, if we only knew this or that. And so this is where that influenced those storytelling was time structuring that was in some cases healing, but that the salve was more of a what he would call it placebo. That because it felt good, therefore I'm cured. You know what a placebo is?
Yes, you discussed it on one of your podcasts.
Okay. So if that's the case, if you understand placebos in that regard, you can actually understand that we can use that part of the mind to great benefit. You literally can, instead of telling yourself a bunch of lies and stories and making yourself miserable, we can tell ourselves the right kind of stories.
The right, well, it's the Noble Eightfold Path. It dissolves itself.
That's what makes it even better is because this stuff makes sense.
Yeah.
And not only does it make sense, but it actually has power on its own. And when I add my own budding and building confidence to it, then that placebo effect almost becomes the most important part, which in the Pali word would be shraddha or confidence on having actually spent the time with the things that are worth thinking about. And so the Satipatthana Sutta then says, okay, well, here's the things that are now worth thinking about. These are the kinds of thoughts to have. But there's a passage in the Sabbasava Sutta number 2 where it makes a very important point in the sense of what is worthy of attention, and when it describes what is unworthy of attention and why it's unworthy, and what is worthy and why it's worthy. Then the next part is and then one's attend wisely that and it's expressed this way. One attends wisely. This is suffering. In other words, when suffering comes up, we can see it directly. This is suffering. Then one attends wisely to this is the cause of suffering. And also one attends wisely to this is what it's like to be free from suffering. A lot of students don't spend much time in that regard of attending wisely to what really is it nice to be. And then we also attend wisely to this is the path that takes us there. Now, you already noticed how that I have decomposed, or let us say, reshifted the order of the Eightfold Noble Path from its traditional way. When it's divided into Sila, Samadhi, Panya, then where does the Sila go? Where does the Samadhi go? And where does the Panya go? All right. So if that's the way the Eightfold Noble Path is set up, then Sila is the way that they talk about it first. Perfection of Sila. But they're looking at it in the sense of a long time frame rather than right now. If your Sila is perfect right now, you're ready to go to the next step. Rather than you have to hang out in a Wat until you stop misbehaving yourself, and then you can sit down for meditation. That's not what they're talking about. And so this is one of the major reasons why people think that samadhi is too difficult, is because they judge themselves and their own behavior as I'm not worthy.
And that's because of aversion to the hindrances, right?
We don't like to see them. That's the whole point back to it, is that I have not seen this anywhere in any Christian literature, nor have I seen it in any Buddhist literature, but the Buddha does make a kind of a reference to it. But I like it this way because this is the way that it first appeared in print under the name of Gloria Steinem, but she's still alive and has said, no, she got it from someplace, but she doesn't remember where. But this is the quote, and it starts with Jesus: "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. But first, it's going to piss you off."
Yeah. Who said that?
Gloria Steinem was the one who was attributed to it, but you can look that up. I mean, the truth
I've
shall
never
set
heard of
you
her.
free, but first it'll piss you off. You can Google that, and they'll tell you all about it.
I watched an interview with a nun recently. She seemed like a very lovely, compassionate person.
Well, where in Perth? No, no, you're in. Sorry, where?
No, sorry, it was on YouTube. I think the channel name is Jubilee. It makes entertainment, but it's based from the perspective of compassion and understanding our diversities.
Okay.
And it was an interview with a nun who who left her Orthodox tradition and joined an unorthodox tradition, but still continued to wear the habit and practice in her own unique way.
Okay. You can shoot me that link later.
Sure, it's called Being a Weed Nun. She cultivates her and the sisters on where they live. They are farmers for cannabis and extract the CBD, and for its health benefits. Yeah, they're called weed nuns.
Okay. Um, this package that we had gotten into from the Sutta number 2, the Sabha Asava Sutta, is looking at the Four Noble Truths
Mm.
right from this very moment. And that we were talking about how the order got arranged. In the way that it's normally done is right view, right attitude. Sometimes they have that word incorrectly as right thought, but we'll let them go with
Is it
right
also
intention.
translated as right intention sometimes?
Yes, but I've got a problem with the word right intention because intentions are built on feelings. That's our wanting, what we want. All right. But right attitude is much more correct.
Because it's less dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
To where then the way that it's listed for starting at number 3 is with right action, right speech, right livelihood. Then comes the samadhi part, which is right action, right sati, right effort, and right samadhi, which is wrongly translated as concentration. But the way that I'm teaching it has to do exactly the way that it's laid out in Sutta number 117 in the Great 40, which then brings it to that sati and right view and right effort run and circle around each other to create right attitude. And so then those four run and circle around each other to bring about right noble samadhi, which is actually referred to as unification of mind.
Apologies. I was thinking. Can you repeat the interplay? Is it between right effort and right attitude?
Right view comes first. And with right view, then right sati arises, and with right effort. So these one and circle around each other. Right effort to practice anapanasati, uh, right view, and the kickoff is right sati. So sati and effort and right view run and circle around, those three of them run and circle around each other, bringing about the fourth, which is right attitude. that attitude of I can do it, that attitude of no matter how obstructed the mind gets, I can clean it out and come back to this present moment. That's the right attitude there. This leads then, these four things unify, coming together through the practice of Anapanasati, then brings about right, noble unification of mind. And the unification of mind here, actually, we can talk about that in real terms. An example is if you tell lies, is that unification of mind, or is that separating yourself from the truth and trying to create some magical world, something that's not real? How about doubt? Doubt is also something that keeps the mind from unifying. So only when we're honest and only when we have freedom from doubt can we begin to collect the mind together so that we become whole and unified and not pulled here and there and the other thing. But in fact, having hindrances keeps the mind from being unified. But when the mind is unified and whole, now, I'm not saying that unified and whole every minute of the day all day long. I'm saying when it's unified and whole in that moment, you will then be free from the hindrances that will lead to then wrong speech, wrong action, and eventually perhaps a wrong livelihood. But when the mind is unified in this moment, you are naturally going to be free from those things. So those are outcomes. So when we teach children Sila Samadhi Panya, we're actually talking about it. You have to be very careful because, in fact, the reality of the situation is Panya Samadhi Sila. But it's normally listed as Panya Sila Samadhi. So there's three ways of looking at it. We got three terms there. Sila goes first and Panya winds up. But when the mind is bent towards noble, then right view comes first. So in the noble eightfold path, so you can actually say that there's really two paths. There's the ordinary path that people hear about, and then there's the noble path that starts with noble right view. But it takes a while to come up to that state of noble right view. But once you do, now you're on the noble path. And so your samadhi becomes noble, and that the attitude becomes noble. All right. So let's start practicing that as soon as we figure out that that's the right way to practice, leading to right, noble unification of mind. That in fact, that word samadhi the word samadhi is almost always in the English translated as concentration. And that we then get an idea of what is concentration because we use that word on like stop watching television and concentrate on your homework kind of way of looking at it. But that can go way too far. The word samadhi, though, never did have that kind of meaning to it. That there's a lot of other Pali words that would include mindfulness and investigation would be that kind of concentration. And sati coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back to it. But the word samadhi actually it appears in the sutras in definition, using the quality of a tent or a yurt, to where you have a center pole and then you have all of the poles around it. Then you have the walls around that. No doubt you've seen a yurt. You know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't know the word yet.
Okay. The yurt is the house that the Mongolians live in when they're nomadic, because it can be taken down and put up, can be taken down and strapped to several horses and then put up. And the main point is this ridgepole. And another way of looking at it, surely you know about the Indian teepee.
Yes.
Okay. The Indian teepee also has a samadhi point, and that's where all the leaning poles.
No, I thought about that, like tying them together.
And they
Yeah.
come together at the top, and it has a flap for the smoke to go out. Okay, that's what we mean by samadhi. It means the gathering together of all of the qualities that are needed.
I
So,
was sorry, I was thinking of the qualities of the seven perfections, and each of them being a base, the seven bases, and reaching a unifying goal, so to speak.
precisely so. And you can see the first jhana also that way,
Mm.
in the sense of getting into first jhana means that we have to gather together the factors.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking about it, because trying to remain in first jhana, so to speak.
Okay. So this is what the word samadhi actually means, is the gathering together so that we're actually going to unify the mind so that you become one whole person. Because normally when we do it this way, in the normal way, one would be a crowd.
Mm.
Why? Because we can remember all kinds of things that happened in the past. We're certainly going to run over some stuff that we want to fix. Then we can think of some good points. Well, every time that we have that old thought, we're going to have a new feeling. We become a different person. That we are, in fact, not unified. But when we become unified, then we become basically the same all the time. We don't have a lot of different moods. We become kind of unified in the mind.
I thought there was great wisdom when I was first drawn uh, in my experiences to Buddhism from a fairly early age. I thought of this expression, same but different. Yeah, and that popped up from time to time. Same but different.
You know, there's a Thai dish called same same.
No.
Okay, never mind. Somebody in a Westerner wanted something, and the Thai cook cooked something, and she presented it to him. And he says, "No, I wanted blah blah." And she said, "Same thing."
Yeah. Should I know I used to know the Thai for same, but I can't remember it anymore. I used to say it when I was ordering if my friend would get something, and I didn't really care too much about what I was eating, but yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so um, getting back then to the Eightfold Path and recognizing that we need to spend some time contemplating and looking at that and seeing how we're applying these four parts and begin to investigate then what it is like to have this unified mind. So these are the kinds of things that we would do through our investigation of, or as the Sutta number 2 puts it, the Sabha Sutta, this suffering, or this is in fact the cause of suffering. And that one that's the cause of suffering is vast, to where the kinds of things that are really worth thinking about is actually quite small and would fit into, in fact, the entire uh, way of looking at it. An example of that would be um, the five aggregates, because the five aggregates are the foundation of Paticca Samuppada. All of the five aggregates are in those 12 steps of Paticca Samuppada. And so this is the reason why the five aggregates become so important. But if you look at it just a little bit differently, what you can do is you can take the four foundations of mindfulness and twist it in a certain way, and you can get the five aggregates right out of it. It's nothing but now a re-looking at, and in fact, the body and the feelings are exactly the same. But what we've done with the mind, instead of looking at the mind and its content, we're looking now at the mind and the way that it works. But we can also understand that you are not your body. This is the most important quality of it. This is why the body is actually empty. It's not empty of cells or empty of food or empty of coronavirus or well, never mind.
It's empty of essence.
Well, when we talk
Intrinsic
about
being.
right, okay, so the essence then would be the core, the nut, or when all the constituent component parts of the body are removed, then you still have the essence of body left, just like gold. That gold has an essence according to people's belief system. But the fact is, no, it's got some intrinsic properties, but those things are what gives it the magic, just like the attachment to the body.
Another thing that I thought was quite interesting was how scientists examine nature, but the more they study, the more they realize there is to matter. Something is kind of created once they find something. Once there's a paradigm shift, they zoom in closer and oh, this is made of these, and a new thing is created, so to speak, even though it was there all along.
Precisely so. And in a way, that's what correct meditation should be. It should be a scientific investigation. Okay. But many people, by adding magic to it, can take it off into all kinds of directions. An example would be that if people truly believe in past lives, because it's a magical belief, they believe it, they want some proof. If it's true, I want to see it. Therefore, I want to have a past life experience. Then they muse, well, I've heard that past life experiences happen only either during or after high jhana. Therefore, that's what I got to go do now, is got to get some high jhana, because I believe in rebirth, and somehow or another, rebirth now is more important than eliminating suffering. Okay, and so in fact, in the sutta that we're talking about in number 117, that's the distinction between right noble view and ordinary right view. Where wrong view, you could say, is easily dismissed. And we'll talk about this at a later time in greater detail about what wrong view would be. But wrong view can be easily dismissed with one phrase, in the sense of, I can get away with it. In other words, there ain't no karma machine at all, or there is even no cause and effect. To where ordinary right view says, yes, there is karma, there is cause and effect, but then they take it too far with the law of karma, so that they begin to look for magical answers.
So that would be wrong view is easily dismissed with right attitude, right?
Right attitude is, no, we are responsible for our behavior, which is also part of right view. Not only, well, right view would be no, we are responsible for our right behavior, and our attitude would be darn tootin' it is. So, one's right, ordinary right view is known to ripen in clinging. It ripens in suffering. We want something, like we want something even out of the meditation, which is another way of getting bitten by the snake. Wanting to have mystical experiences, wanting to have bragging rights. In fact, if Buddhism's got any bragging rights, it's jhana. Jhana is the bragging rights.
It's sort of like the fruit. People eat the fruit and they just talk about how tasty it is, and which coaxes others into wanting.
Well, you're right, but you could also go look at it this way slightly differently, and that is that the taste of the fruit is marvelous, and I'm eating the fruit right now. But the guy sitting next to me says, "Yeah, but look how much big pile of fruit I've got in front of me. I've got more fruit than you do." But then when he gets new fruit he doesn't eat it, he puts it in his pile because that's what's important to him. That's bragging rights. Okay, so you could do jhanas the same way, rather than just allow them to be. The Buddha used the term pleasant abiding, because that's basically all the jhanas are. It's just pleasant abiding. Well, the first jhana is also pleasant abiding. It's just no need for the magic or the bragging rights. But if you have plenty of time on your hands, that's something to do with it. It's a good time structure, so to speak. But the important thing is to get free from dissatisfaction and bring on a state of satisfaction for ourselves, and then maintain that. And part of the maintaining then is then going to spending our time on the five aggregates and Paticca Samuppada, and watch how the mind works, and going deeper into the Eightfold Noble Path, and understanding how that works, and a great sense of satisfaction and joy come out of that. But along with it comes the eradication of three fetters. Three fetters are abandoned that way. The first fetter is the fetter of personality, or the personality view of self. But if one believes in rebirth and reincarnation, then that's a kind of a self that they're trying to promote by looking for experiences that prove that I exist as a rebirthed or reincarnated kind of thing. And so this is basically a lot more about Hinduism than it is in Buddhism, but it's still quite strong, especially in Western Buddhism, that really doesn't have a lot of noble support. That almost all of Western Buddhism is magical. Where in Thailand, it's easy enough to find noble mixed in with the ordinary. Especially in Chiang Mai, there's actually a Bhikkhu Buddhadasa center in Chiang Mai.
I never knew that.
Okay, well, you might check around. You might even check it on the internet or what. If I find it, I'll send you a link.
But would you recommend going? The air pollution in Chiang Mai is quite bad. One of the reasons why I didn't go on this retreat, other than the coronavirus, was the pollution, because last time I went on retreat, the pollution in Jomtong was actually worse than in Chiang Mai. And they say, okay, don't remember not to practice too hard. On your breaks, you can walk around the lake. So I walked around the lake. I looked across the lake, and I couldn't see across the lake because there's so much smoke. And I didn't have a mask, which made me worry. And yeah, I mean, I could go um, by making myself feel as safe as possible by wearing a mask, but I just don't think I need to go right now, of course.
Okay. No, I'm not recommending that you do. What I was actually the point that I was making is that the noble Dhamma has more of a home in Thailand than it does in the West. Even though you're here in Thailand, I would make that point.
Okay.
Because when we have a lot of magical thinking, that prevents us from practicing correctly because it gets us into wanting things and we go off in the wrong direction with it. And that it's hard for people to understand that, well, I've been reading all this stuff about jhana and I've been reading this book by this teacher on jhana, and that seems to be everything to do. And when you tell them, well, the Buddha practiced jhana and recommended or at least figured out for himself that it wasn't what he was even looking for. So why is it still practiced? The answer to that is that there's uses for it, but that's not what the point of the teachings of the Buddha are all about. That basically you can say that, well, those are pleasant abidings, and if you have a lot of time in your hands with no place to go and nothing to do, then those are nice things to do with the mind. But the very first important thing that we need to do with the mind is figure things out first, not try to find these experiences. So that's what we're basically doing, is figuring out what's going on. And when we do get it figured out, then that first fetter is released. In other words, when we do figure out who I am, and the way that we do that is through understanding how the mind works, through investigation. And we come to understand that there actually is no self. In the first place that we look for that, and we can see that there's no self in this body. That it's true that I cannot be 10 years older or 5 years younger. I cannot, in fact, become a girl today and a water buffalo tomorrow. I am not a changeling. This is not me. I cannot do with this body what I want to do. It grows old all by itself. But it can be trained. It can be trained. One of the ways we can train the body is to breathe correctly. The other one is to train the hands to become graceful. And during these days, to keep them away from the face. And so the body can be trained, but it is not ours. It doesn't belong to me. And yet, look at how many industries are devoted to that. I am the body. For instance, the cosmetic industry. The entire cosmetic industry is based upon I am the lips. I am the body. So if I put paint on the lips and the lips are pretty, that means I'm pretty. And then you can extrapolate that to sportswear, all kinds of clothing. In fact, 100 years ago or more, and I think that this happened also in Thailand, but I'm not sure because I wasn't there to witness it. But in the United States, who you were depended upon how you dressed. So if you didn't go out in public in a business suit, then you were not. You were, a ruffian or a scallion or whatever like that. That kind of clothing was really, really important. Was how you dressed. I think in many, many other cultures it's still that way, but the first thing that's being introduced into the culture is this Western business suit. In other words, the Saudis can come out of their sorry for the terminology, their raghead and fan belt, but they can only come into a business suit. Or that would be the first way in it. I think by now they can go into sports clothing. But the Saudi royal family would never dress in the kind of attire that would not show the status to whom they belong. This is a very important quality of who I am is how I'm dressed, and how I'm dressed shows the body. That's even more true with women than it is with men. And it depends upon what culture and what circumstance and whatnot like that. The Thai people, as you know, don't like it when the Farang are too scantily clad, but they do so because they're on vacation. They don't dress that way at home, but since they're on vacation and all the other Westerners are dressing in bikinis, and I don't know about your neighborhood, but we've got a lot of bikinis on this island.
In the old city, you can see things like that. Yeah.
Right. So that's a definite clash of cultures, is because the Thai people would never dress that way. Even when Thai women would go swimming, they will do it almost fully dressed. The same way that they did in the 1920s in the United States, before bathing wear became sexualized. So basically what we're getting at is, look at all the industries that have to do with that basic magical belief that people have of I am the body, where in fact you're not the body. And this is one of the things that the Buddha was really strongly pointing at when he was, that's why the 5 aggregates are covered in so many different places and so many different ways. It generally has wound up being almost a singy-songy thing, like the Buddha asks the monks a question, is there any self in the body? And the answer would be no, there is no self in the body. But that would mean then that those monks had already done that investigation. They'd already come to the conclusion that they were not the body. And then we come to the next one, which is quite a leap forward, and that is, I am not my feelings. That's really a hard one. Why? Because most people think that I am my feelings. There's not much else there to do except to feel. Until we realize, wait a minute, people don't feel the way they want to feel. If they were the feelings, then they would have the kind of feelings they wanted to have. But in fact, our feelings are operated by the society at large, and always it's the outside world. There's also some other stuff, and that is all the outside world that we stored inside, so that we can barf it up, regurgitate it, and feel bad all over again.
The volitional, the sankharas.
I just mentioned them, right?
Yeah.
I hadn't gotten to them yet because we were still working with feelings, but we were talking about feelings are coming from both internal and external. But that's what runs the feelings, not me. That if I'm going to run the feelings, I'm going to have to do some work here. And in fact, in that regard, for most people, the feelings control the individual. It's not the individual who controls his feelings. So they are not, in fact, the same thing. Because if the feelings and the soul and the individual were the same thing, then the feelings would be exactly what the individual wants. But in fact, they're different. You can already see that you don't always feel the way you want to feel. Sometimes when you see a Mack truck headed right down on you, you feel fear. And so that's something that needs to be looked at, contemplated, thought about. This is something that's worth thinking about, is that I'm not these feelings. But with working with First Jhana, what we begin to do is we begin to recognize these feelings can be manipulated and eventually with skill can be controlled. But they'll never go away. We don't want them to go away. These are the instincts that kept humans alive all these tens of millions, thousands of years, depending upon the way you look at it. So we need these instincts. But the instinctual system is what runs most people's lives, and they don't even know it because they think that it's the thinking part of their brain that is them. But then they get confused. I am the body. I am these feelings. I am this. I am that. Our whole language is built into it. The way we spend our time defines who we are, in the sense of I'm a barber, or I'm a clerk, or I'm a doctor. So our profession often defines who we are, but a doctor is not a doctor, not all the time, not even when he's with his patient. Sometimes he's looking at her knees, and when it's her elbow, she came in with. And so, in that regard, look how the mind is scattered. The mind is just scattered all over the place. And so how can I be this when I'm all of those other things too? Kind of one at a time as they take advantage of the situation or as they arise on their own based upon conditions is another way of saying it. So based upon conditions. In other words, if it had been an old ugly woman who was had rotten teeth and was overweight, and she showed him the elbow, that's all he wants to see is elbow. But a cute young chick walks into the office and shows him his elbow, he's going to have a hard time looking at it. Okay, so that shows then that the mind is not in control in a way also. That we are not the mind. We're not these feelings, but we're also not the mind. But let's break the mind down into three different parts, and that would be consciousness, perception, and sankhara that you mentioned. Now, the sankhara is actually the old collected together past. Next time we talk, we'll talk about how all of that stuff is divided up when we look at it from Paticca Samuppada. But right now, we're only looking at it from one perspective, and that is the mental sankhara. And the mental sankhara is what is processed through perception in order for the big kind of consciousness that philosophers talk about. So the Buddha talks about consciousness in the sense of sense consciousness, that which you see. But then when you have consciousness, what you actually see is an internal object. All right, that's what we recognize, that's what we think about, is the internally constructed image. In that regard, no one lives in the actual real world. That's not possible. Everyone lives in an internal world, an interpreted world. We try to make sense out of the real world because the real world on its own doesn't have any sense.
So consciousness, in a sense, moves towards the things that are already conditioned, and from that it constructs physical and mental matter. And then from that, we start to sense things, and then we engage with those things. And then depending on our attention to pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, then it can either cut off there or continue the
things out of order. Next time we'll get that order straightened out. Today we're talking about is basically spending a lot of time on a snake that kept us from getting deep into the to this stuff. So I tell you what, let's kind of finish off now, and we'll pick up on this. But the important thing is that the consciousness here that we're talking about is sense consciousness, that which the eyes actually see, that I-ness, that quality of vision itself is not who you are, nor is it any of the senses. Okay? You are not your proprioceptive system, nor are you the hearing itself. That, for instance, you could go blind and still be you. You could go deaf and still be you. Lose both of those senses and you got a Helen Keller, but I'm not sure about that. That's a bit difficult. However, by seeing that you can lose the eyes or you can lose the ears, indicates that they're really not you. The senses, not any of the senses are you, but they are associated with the body. In fact, the eyes more belong to the body than they do to you. You say, yeah, but I can focus them and put them any place that I want to.
The light and the pupil dilation is completely uncontrolled, so to speak.
Precisely that.
Yeah, but conditioned.
A lot of the stuff. And in fact, your blink rate can be controlled, but if you don't control it, it'll do it all its own. There's a lot of things that happen automatically in the body.
And that's why breathing is such
an
object.
You don't have to actually digest your food, now do you?
No.
No, you don't have to do that. You don't have to gather the food particles in the way and put the right stuff in the blood and all of that, nor do you have to pack the colon. Your only job is to have the right posture at the right place at the right time when you evacuate the colon. But whether you evacuate it or not is often not up to you. So we have very little control over the body. Very little control. And the control that we have gives rise to the illusion that I am the body because I can control some of it, some of the time. But if it were truly me, then I could control all of it all the time, and that's not possible. Therefore, the body, not me. The feeling's exactly the same way. The I and the consciousness is exactly the same way. Perception, which I'll make this distinction now, there's two different kinds of language that is used, Vinaya and Dhammarato, but it's pointing at the same thing. Dhammarato means that the rupa, or the real physical item, is named. And that naming process is the perception. And that naming then is what we do with it. We no longer hold the rupa. We work entirely with the nama. And the way that we work with that then is by what is called in the Pali Salayatana. Now, the atana are the actual eyes, but your internal vision is called the salayatana. The way that we paint pictures or even run movies inside of our head is normally because of this perception that flags stuff out of the past. You could also almost go to the point of saying that perception is a projector, like a movie projector. And that all that consciousness does is push the button saying, which movie am I going to play? And so out of the Sankara comes the movie at the projector of perception, then puts the movie out on the screen that is called now Salayatana. So that's one of the ways of looking at it. And none of that process is you. You have very little control over that process until you started meditating. And now we're beginning to manipulate that process just a bit. But Also, we're going to start adding to it that one of your ways of having good, correct, right thoughts, appropriate, wise attention, is to see these things and to recognize not me, just a process. These are just functions that are happening within the mind. But it is not me.
What do you think? Do you think it can be misleading to take it a step beyond that? Perhaps it might give rise to choiceless awareness, so to speak, which I'll say what I wrote down. By identifying with anything, we also then at the same time express what we are not, therefore neither self or not self, just whatever arises in its suchness.
Precisely. Okay. At this level, choiceless awareness is useful, but not when the choiceless awareness is dealing with hindrance. This is an area then that you have to make sure how much choiceless you're going to be making. In other words, we still have to remain on guard because it's kind of a catch-22. Let me see if I can get it this way. So long as we're in a state of satisfaction, that is a state of choiceless awareness because we're satisfied with everything until something comes up that we're not satisfied with. The question is, can I push that out and remain in my state of satisfaction? If I do that, then I am no longer in a state of choiceless awareness. I have now made a choice to throw that out so that I can come back to a state of choiceless awareness. The choiceless awareness, while there's hindrances in the mind, is not the best practice to have.
Or at least not all the time, right?
Well, if you had a choice between having a hindered, how to say it, unsatisfactory state, and your choice was to have a satisfactory state, wouldn't it be wise to make the choice to have a satisfactory state and to eliminate the unsatisfactory state?
Yes.
Okay, that's what we're getting at then. How can you wake up to that? That's your sati, is to wake up to see, hey, wait a minute, I'm not doing what I think is more appropriate of doing. So in the very first, we use the breath just to get the student going as to make a distinction between what's worthy of our attention and what's not worthy of our attention. Well, what's not worthy of our attention is everything we've been paying attention to. And what is worthy of our attention? This present moment, starting with the breath.
And one more question. I thought of it. I used to think of the Four Noble Truths as four kind of separate things. Like you analyze this, and you analyze this, and you analyze this, and you analyze this. But then the other day I was thinking, well, aren't they kind of together? If something unsatisfactory arises, then you can see its unsatisfactoriness.
Mm-hmm.
But by seeing that, you then understand its causes and its conditions, perhaps its origination, and then by seeing that, you can see that just through that seeing, it's possible to be unbound, so to speak, from conditioning, and then that is the path to that leads away from dukkha.
So that's the whole idea then, is that it is just one thing. The Buddha, in fact, in that same sutta, the simile of the snake, where the five aggregates are discussed, this is where the Buddha makes that so profoundly important statement when he says, both formerly and now, I teach only one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you can see that's the Four Noble Truths.
Mm.
Only one thing, not four, only one thing, dukkha, dukkha nirodha. To
It's
see the
extinction.
and to it out.
Mm.
Okay, so the one kind of choiceless awareness would be dukkha, and that's it. No choices. Just choiceless awareness of dukkha. Or then there's the other way of looking at it is the awarenesses of dukkha. The removal of the dukkha then is satisfaction, and now choiceless awareness is useful because there's nothing left at this present moment until the old stuff comes back up again, and we need to see that. And now we're not going to be choiceless about it anymore. There's only one thing that the Buddha teaches, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha, but it's expressed in these Four Noble Truths. I've got a whole long list of these one-liners, by the way. The Buddha had the best one. The shortest one was the one that Ananda comes up with, and that is just path. Just one word. The path. That's it. What is the path? The path, dukkha nirodha. Dukkha, dukkha nirodha. Okay, so he's got it down to one word. I like this four-word combination. Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah.
That's the whole teaching of the Buddha. Don't worry, be happy. Dukkha is the worry. Be happy is the dukkha nirodha. Goenka has the term, never mind, start again. Again. And you can see the whole teaching of the Buddha is wrapped up right in those four words. Never mind that crap. Start again into your happy joy. So, you're absolutely right. In the beginning, many students, when they hear the Four Noble Truths, they just divide them up and say, this I've got to do. This is a whole chapter of a book or something. And then this one's got to do, and it's a whole chapter of a book. No, it's just one thing. Just one thing. Dukkha, dukkha nirodha. That's all there is to it. When you see that Mack truck coming after you, you step out of its way. That's the entire teaching of the Buddha. The question is, can you identify Mack trucks? Because if you can identify them, you can get out of their way. So all kinds of them are there. That's why we spend so much time talking about that which is unworthy of talking about or thinking about. What is it that is not worth our while to spend time on? Those things that do not lead to a wholesome state. They will lead to unwholesome states. And so this is, we'll go into it a bit more next time about the first three fetters. This first one, though, is the doozy. I am not the body. I am not the feeling. I am not perception. I am not all of my memory base and everything that I remember and all the stuff that I built up. And I am also not sense conscious. Well, if I'm not all of those, any of those kind of things, then what the heck am I? The answer is the bucket for suffering. That's all I am. It's just a bucket for suffering. If there's going to be suffering, it's got to have a container. Got to put it someplace. Okay, this is what the self is the vehicle for suffering, and we'll talk about that more. Right
So
now,
that reminds me of the sort of suffering building the house and seeing what the house is built up of.
that's another way of looking at it precisely. That the house, who am I? I'm the house that suffering built. I'm the expression of the suffering. So that's another way of putting it. But in both cases, they're mental constructions that I have concocted. So now we have a problem with language. Because if I want to use the language properly, then I have to use words that are associated with self. But if I am not using any of those pronouns because there's not a self, then we get pretty tongue-tied in English because it's built on nouns. And in fact, a better language for humans would be one that's all verbs and very few or no nouns at all, because that would be describing process,
Yeah.
not result. But our language doesn't do what I want it to do. It's not my language.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's finish up now, and we'll continue on in a couple of days.
Okay.
I've given you something to get started with. What is worthy of attention? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Dhammarato.
This is one's right view. These 5 aggregates. Begin to look at them. All right, well, we'll see you
Okay,
later.
will do. Thank you. Bye-bye.